Hello students in EDU 146 Child Guidance. I would like to make this online course as close to an in-class course as I possibly can. And so one of the things I would like to do is to start an in-class course with reading a children's book. As you know, children's books make wonderful times with students, one-on-one or even as a whole class. And many times when we have even guidance issues with children, some ways to just calm children down is to read a great book. Another way that we can use books is instructing children on correct behavior management as well. So books are just a great way to engage children in a variety of ways. It's also a great way for transition times from one activity to another. So books you can use in so many ways, and we will be talking a little bit about different books throughout this course that you can use with children and with children with challenging behaviors, or when you're trying to teach a social skill to students. So beware that I will be trying to read a few books with you throughout the course. One of my favorite books to start a school year with is Miss Bindergarten Gets Ready for Kindergarten. Miss Bindergarten Gets Ready for Kindergarten by Joseph Slate and illustrated by Ashley Wolf. It's the first day of kindergarten, and oh, Adam Crump wakes up. Brenda Heath brushes her teeth. Christopher Beaker finds his sneaker. Miss Bindergarten gets ready for kindergarten. Danny Hess rushes to dress. Emily Moko cools her cocoa. Fran Lister kisses her sister. Miss Bindergarten gets ready for kindergarten. Gwen McGunney packs her bunny. Henry Fetter fights his sweater. Ian Lowe says, "I won't go." Miss Bindergarten, though, gets ready for kindergarten. Jessie Syke pedals her bike. Kiki Wong hops along. Lenny Loom says, "Vroom, vroom, vroom." Miss Bindergarten gets ready for kindergarten. Maddie Lindo looks out the window. Noah Bond climbs right on. Ophelia Nye hugs goodbye. Miss Bindergarten gets ready for kindergarten. Patricia Packer sneaks a cracker. Quentin Wynn high-fives his friend. Raffy Mack high-fives back. Sarah Von Hoff is the first one off. Miss Bindergarten is almost ready for kindergarten. Tommy Tuttle jumps a puddle. Ursula Crew ties her shoe, and Vicky Densel bites her pencil. Now Miss Bindergarten is all ready for kindergarten. Wanda Chin marches in. Xavier Rowe yells, "Hello!" Yolanda Pound looks around. Zach Blair finds his chair. "Good morning, kindergarten," says Miss Bindergarten. And oh, the fun's begun. The end. As you will notice that each one of the characters in the story, each student, starts with a different letter of the alphabet. And so you can discuss that with children as you read the book. The other thing you will notice is that there are great rhyming words in this book, and children will love that as well. And then you can also use this book with children maybe who are at the end of the year in preschool and will transition on to kindergarten. You can talk about all the fun things that are there at kindergarten. You can look at all the different pictures in the book. You can talk about how she's getting ready for kindergarten. What do they see is going to be at kindergarten? What kind of fun things will they enjoy while they're at kindergarten? So there's some wonderful ways to use this book with children, and it's a great way even to start the year with children in pre-kindergarten or preschool as well. I hope that you will enjoy the different readings that we do and that we will share some different ways that you can use books with children. So tune in for more of those later on. And now we would like to transition into a little more of an instructional time. So listen carefully. Hello students from EDU 146 Child Guidance class. We've already completed our book reading for today. I hope you enjoyed that. Now we're going to move into more of a lecture time for this Module 1. For Module 1, you will have 2 different video lectures, so please be sure that you take the time to view each one of those. You will probably want to do them at separate times because they will probably be a little lengthy. The first thing I would like for you to see is that we will be spending a great deal of time on this particular website, which there is a link in the course for this. This is the Center on Social and Emotional Foundations for Early Learning, and we are actually doing these modules. I'll be talking through these modules and these slide presentations for this particular module and probably Module 2 and maybe even into Module 3. So pay close attention to everything that we're going to be discussing. I believe it'll be helpful for you, and I hope that you'll learn a lot. So here we go into the actual PowerPoint that we will be doing today. This is some of the topics that we'll be covering over the next few modules. The pyramid model provides the framework for the implementation of practices needed to promote young children's social and emotional competence and effectively address challenging behavior. Now, this pyramid addresses each of the components that we will be talking about in each one of the modules coming up. This model is consistent with developmentally appropriate practices in that it includes key practices for promoting social emotional development and only focuses on more intensive interventions for those children with the most persistent challenging behavior. The focus is on promotion and prevention. And you'll see as I show you the pyramid, the bottom 3 levels of the pyramid deals with prevention. And the use of intensive individualized interventions are for children who have persistent challenging behavior. And here's the model. As you can see, relationships form the foundation of the pyramid and are necessary for everything else we do. So that is at the bottom. Then as we move up, well-designed environments support children's appropriate behaviors and make it less likely that children will need to engage in challenging behavior. Environments can be designed to teach children expectations and promote their engagement and interactions. Now, it is so important to teach children the skills that they need so they don't have to use challenging behaviors. So that's what we need to do as teachers, is to teach appropriate behaviors and appropriate skills. When we do all of this, children are less likely to engage in challenging behavior. So then we are less likely to need to design intensive individualized interventions. As you can see here at the top is that intensive intervention. This is about usually only about 10% of children will you have to provide intensive intervention. So that's where we try to get other support from people to help us to help those children with extreme challenging behaviors. There are a variety of things we can do to prevent challenging behaviors and to teach children appropriate behaviors. As adults, we must focus on prevention before we focus on changing children's inappropriate behaviors. So we're going to focus on ensuring that the classroom is a place children want to be and designing environments that promote engagement with children, and then teaching children the skills they need to be successful. Several national reports have discussed the importance of social emotional development in children's readiness for and success in school. These publications have identified a number of social emotional skills that help children to be successful as they transition into kindergarten. So by the time they get to kindergarten, these are the skills that we feel like are very important for children to know. They need to be able to have confidence. They need a capacity to develop relationship with peers and adults. They need to be able to concentrate and persist on challenging tasks. They need to have the ability to effectively communicate their emotions. They need the ability to listen to instructions and be attentive. And they need the ability to solve social problems. So how do you know when a child doesn't have a specific skill? What do children do when they can't persist at a challenging task and they're faced with something that's hard for them? Do they give up? They get frustrated? They stomp their feet? Do they walk away? Do they throw things? What do they do? Children often use challenging behavior when they don't have more appropriate behaviors or skills to accomplish the same goal or to communicate the same message. This means that our focus has to be on teaching children new skills rather than trying to get them to stop using challenging behaviors. We need to teach children what to do rather than what not to do. So if a child doesn't know how to read, what do? We teach. If a child doesn't know how to swim, we teach. If a child doesn't know how to multiply, we teach. If a child doesn't know how to drive, we teach. If a child doesn't know how to behave, what do? We should teach, not punish. So why can't we finish that last sentence as automatically as we do the others? This applies to children who speak another language or whose home culture values different behaviors than the early childhood setting. Home culture might value listening to adults during mealtime versus engaging in conversation with adults. The goal is to facilitate children's learning of skills valued in the school community in order to ensure success, while at the same time honoring the values and beliefs of the home culture and language. This can be a real balancing act. So some of the basic assumptions about challenging behavior, number one is challenging behavior usually has a message that I'm bored, I'm sad, you hurt my feelings, or I need some attention. Challenging behavior often occurs when children don't have the appropriate language or social skills to achieve the same purpose. Children with challenging behavior most often do not have disabilities. Other variables that might contribute to children's challenging behavior, such as lack of sleep, or hunger, or stress in the home, maybe just their temperament, genetic factors even, different contextual expectations, what is expected at them at home versus what's expected at the early childhood center. And even second language development affects their behavior. These should be considered when designing individualized plans for children. So when children use challenging behaviors over time, those behaviors are working for them, then they're going to continue them. Such as the child who grabs toys from another child rather than asking to play. If the child usually ends up with the toy after grabbing it, then he's going to continue to grab because grabbing is working for him. So we need to focus on teaching children what to do in place of the challenging behavior. There's a lot we can do to promote social and emotional competence, such as having a positive relationship with the child, having schedules and routines that support the child, having activities that are engaging and teaching a child the skills he or she needs to be successful. These topics are just a few of the things that we're going to be talking about in these different modules. So the first big thing that we want to talk about is relationships, which is the foundation of this pyramid. This foundation of the pyramid includes those practices that build nurturing and responsive relationships. As we think about the relationships level of the pyramid model, we will examine how to build relationships with children, families, and team members. Now, there's an inventory practice sheet that we could be, if we were in class, we would actually sit down and try to do, but I will just show you that inventory. And this is a building positive relationships inventory, and I will put this in the class under resources, but this just kind of, you get to kind of look through this and say, now, if you are already in a classroom, do I do these things? You might even look at this, and when you're observing in the classroom where you're volunteering, how does the teacher in the classroom do some of these things? But this is a great self-assessment, so when you begin your own classroom, or if you are currently in a classroom as a teacher or an assistant teacher, these might be some things that you might want to look at. And we're specifically looking right now at developing meaningful relationship with children and families, and this section right here is what we're going to be talking about at this time. So if we were in the classroom, we would actually go through that. You would select your greatest strengths and identify maybe even some practices that you would like to improve on. But we won't be doing that. This is the hardest thing about an online class, is not being able to actually ask questions and talk about these things in small groups to get feedback from one another. But we'll do the best we can. So why is it important to build relationships? Well, the relationships we build with children, families, and the colleagues we work with are at the foundation of everything we do with children. We know about the importance of relationships in terms of children's development and success in school. It's important to build these relationships with all children as a context for supporting their social-emotional development and, of course, preventing challenging behavior. It'll be easier to address challenging behavior if we already have a relationship with the child and with the family. I know when I was teaching, I always made sure that at the beginning of the school year, I made sure I contacted all the parents, talked to them one-on-one with the parent about their child, told them great positive things about their child, and then we continued to build that relationship with the child throughout, and the parents, throughout the school year, so that when maybe there was a challenging behavior that we needed to address, we had already built in that wonderful positive relationship ahead of time, and it was much easier to confront that challenging behavior with the child and with the parents. So, children with the most challenging behaviors especially need these relationships, and yet their behaviors often prevent them from benefiting from those relationships, because what do we do sometimes when we have those children who are presenting those challenging behaviors? A lot of times we try to either ignore them and we don't want to build a relationship with them because they frustrate us, or we're constantly on them all the time talking about how they need to behave better, or we need them to do this or do that, or don't do this or don't do that. So we're not really spending time building a good positive relationship with them. And adults' time and attention are very important to children, and we need to be sure that we are giving them that time and attention at times other than when we're engaging with them in that challenging behavior. Parents and other colleagues, people that you might have to work with, such as mental health providers and therapists, are critical partners in building children's social emotional competence. We should all want to work together to ensure children's success and prevent challenging behavior. Our goals as teachers should be to help each child feel accepted in the group. We should assist children in learning to communicate and get along with others. We need to be encouraging feelings of empathy and mutual respect among children and adults in the classroom. We should provide a supportive environment in which children can learn and practice appropriate and acceptable behaviors as individuals and as a group. Another activity we would do if we were in the classroom, which I would love for you to just kind of look at this moment in time, is looking at this little handout, and it's called Hot Button Activity. And the purpose of this is to acknowledge how difficult it is to deal with children with challenging behavior. It is really important for us as teachers and other caregivers to have support when we're working with children with challenging behavior. It's difficult to see beyond the challenging behavior, and it helps us to have someone else who can brainstorm possible solutions with us. So we want to make sure that we are have that support from other people. So I just want to look at this is examining attitude about challenging behaviors. What behaviors push your button? And how do these behaviors make you feel? What is your response when these behaviors occur? And how does this impact your relationship with a child and his family? So if you were to look at this hot button activity sheet, you would, on each one of these circles, you're going to write down the behavior that pushes your buttons. You know, what would that behavior be? Could it be that they tell you no and they, are argumentative, or they like to run out of the room? You know, what is the particular behavior that pushes your buttons, that just really bothers you? Then after you think about that, I want everybody to think about it, try to come up with one or two things. And what pushes one person's button might be very different than what pushes another individual's button. You know, past experiences with other children, or maybe your training experiences and level of support for dealing with challenging behaviors are just some of the factors that are going to play into what behavior it is that pushes your button. So then you want to write down what your feelings are. If you've thought about that one thing that pushes your button, or one or two things that pushes your button, then what are your feelings when you're faced with those behaviors? Does it make you frustrated? Does it make you feel like you don't know what you're doing? Does it just makes you mad, or you feel like a failure, or maybe it makes you want to get another job? Then, after you think about that, you would go on and you would think about, write down the impact your feelings have on your relationship with the children who exhibit those behaviors. So, how does that affect your interactions with children when they engage in those behaviors? Maybe you might end up avoiding the child when they act like that, or you may interact in a not so pleasant way with the child after they engage in those behaviors. It is very difficult to be effective with children when you are feeling this way. It's important to plan a strategy for dealing with these situations. So just think about, how do your responses impact your relationship with the child or even the family? Do you try to even avoid those families when you have those types of children exhibiting those behaviors and you're totally frustrated all the time with them? And that's not good either. Okay, so there are two research studies that make the point that there are individual and culturally based beliefs that affect our attitudes about challenging behaviors even. Most children don't come to school knowing what teachers expect them to do. And this could be due to the child's lack of experiences in group care settings, or to differences in families' and teachers' expectations of children's behavior. Studies show that parents and teachers sometimes have differences in their expectations about children's behavior, which may then influence children's understanding about expectations in the classroom. Because one thing may be expected at home and a different thing is expected in the classroom. Culturally based beliefs affect our attitudes toward behavior. What skills we expect children to engage in independently at certain ages, and how we expect children to interact with adults. Those things can all be culturally based beliefs. For instance, let me show you these slides. Here's the mean age expectation in months for different milestones. And if you will notice, there are, just looking at the training cup, the Filipino families think that children should be able to do that. They do it at 21 months, whereas Caucasian families do that at 12 months. Do you see the huge difference there? Let's just look at using utensils. You know, Caucasians, 17.7 months, whereas Puerto Ricans, 26.5 months, and then Filipinos are 32 months, almost at 3 years old. Some of the other differences, weaning them off of the breast. Caucasians, 16.8 months, whereas Filipinos, again, at that 3-year point. Sleeping by themselves, Caucasians, 13.8 months, Puerto Ricans 14.6, and Filipinos 38.8 months. These are huge differences. How about sleeping all night? Again, 32.4 months Filipinos, whereas Caucasians 11.4. One of the other things is playing alone. Now this is interesting. Caucasians believe children shouldn't really have to play alone till 25 months. And whereas the Filipinos are 12.3 months, they should be able to play alone. So just looking at these differences of some of these different milestones leads you to believe, well, one thing happens at home for certain cultures, whereas in the classroom, our expectations may be totally different, which then could cause some challenging behaviors. Here's another behavioral expectations of two groups of mothers of studies that have been done. Believing parents and children should play together. The Korean American mothers say, oh man, only 54% believe that, whereas European American mothers believe 96% that parents and children should play together. That kind of goes back to this whole thing about playing alone. And here's the differences. Whereas here we are here about how they think parents and children should play together. How about preferring children play with sex-type toys, like boys play with trucks, girls play with dolls? Korean American mothers believe 71%, yes, that's what should happen, whereas European American mothers say 43%. No, not as many believe that. Provide children with many chances to decide, like giving them choices. Well, only 11% of Korean American mothers believe that you should give children choices to decide on certain things, whereas 66% believe the European American mothers believe. So do you see the cultural differences and how that can play a role in the classroom? So these things affect how we manage our personal stress as teachers in the classroom. It's important that we refrain our thoughts so we can engage in more positive interaction with children and use these as opportunities for growth. For instance, an upsetting thought would be, that child is a monster. This is getting ridiculous. He'll never change. I'm sick of putting out fires. Or here's some calming ways of thinking about that. Instead of thinking of that child as a monster and this is getting ridiculous, a more calming way of thinking of that is, this child is testing to see where the limits are. My job is to stay calm and help him learn better ways to behave. Instead of saying, I'm sick of putting out fires, this is another calming way to say it. I can handle this. I am in control. They've just learned some powerful ways to get control. I will teach them more appropriate ways to behave. There's quite a difference in the way that the upsetting thought not only upsets you, it upsets the child, it controls the way that you think about the child, whereas those calming thoughts are a little more positive way of looking at the child and the situation and the behavior. An upsetting thought might be, I wonder if the corner grocery is hiring, whereas a calming thought would be, I feel undervalued right now. I need to seek support from my peers and supervisor. Or an upsetting thought might be, he ruins everything. This is going to be the worst year of my career. Well, a more calming way of thinking about that is, having her in my class is going to be a wonderful professional development experience. What a different way of looking at it. So when you look back at some of those push your buttons types of behaviors, is there some ways that you could rethink that or rethink that child or that behavior and give it a different spin with a more calming thought? There is another handout that gives us some other ways of reframing some problems. So the problem might be, he whines from the moment he gets here until the time he gets on the bus to go home. Well, a way to reframe that or to rethink it in a more positive light might be, he must really miss his family. Begin to think about where the child is coming from. A problem statement might be, she's clingy not only with her mother, but with other adults as well. Well, here's another way to reframe that. She might be slow to warm up in new settings or in the presence of other children and adults. Here's one. I have to watch him like a hawk, or he'll run down the hall or go out the gate. Here's another way to think about it. He may not understand my expectations about staying with the group, or he's very active. And here's a fourth way to look at one situation. She constantly knocks over other children's constructions or destroys other children's artwork. A reframing way to think of that is she may want to join other children's play and she may not know how to ask. Those are the kinds of things we're going to have to teach them how to do that. Or she may be frustrated because she does not know how to play with the materials or complete her art project. Again, something we may have to teach them, that maybe they don't automatically know how to do this. So if you were to think about one of those behaviors, you could write it down here if we were in the class, or if you want to run this off, I put this in the class module as well, and you could look at it and begin to kind of do some professional development of your own and write some of these situations down. So that whole upsetting thought and calming thought is a great activity to do to try to help you reframe some of those ideas. We're going to stop with that for now. I hope that this little lecture has helped you, and then in a few minutes or maybe a few days you may want to look at the next lecture, video lecture that we have. We'll talk more about the adult-child interactions and have a few activities with that. Thank you.